Hello guys, welcome to Infinite Stories. Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Let's get into the story. Rita lived in a mansion, yet she felt imprisoned. Her husband, Solomon, a billionaire, constantly reminded her that he had saved her from poverty. To the world, she was lucky, but inside, she endured his condescending words and suffocating control. At first, she had accepted it, believing gratitude was her duty. But deep inside, something was changing. She was no longer the quiet, obedient woman he had married. Solomon prided himself on control, believing women were meant to obey. Rita had always played her role well, but lately, he sensed a shift. There was a fire in her eyes, a quiet defiance he couldn't explain. He dismissed it, convinced she would never challenge him. What he didn't realize was that Rita was slowly preparing to reclaim her life. Rita followed Solomon's strict routine, avoiding anything that might displease him. He controlled what she wore, where she went, and whom she spoke to. But as she stared into the mirror, she saw a woman she no longer recognized. The silent rebellion within her was growing stronger. Solomon believed he had tamed his wife. She remained obedient, grateful, just as he expected. But he noticed subtle changes, moments of quiet resistance. He brushed it off, convinced she was powerless against him. Yet, the cracks in his perfect world had begun to form. One evening, Solomon dismissed Rita's opinion at dinner, laughing at her childish thoughts. But instead of lowering her gaze, she held his stare and calmly said, "I have a mind of my own." The room fell silent. For the first time, Solomon saw something new in her, an unsettling confidence. He waved it off as a fleeting moment, but Rita knew it was the beginning. That night, she made a decision: she would no longer let him dictate her life. She would find herself, even if it meant facing his wrath. Rita started making small choices, reading books Solomon disapproved of, refusing to shrink under his gaze, and questioning his decisions. Each act of defiance, no matter how small, fueled her growing strength. Solomon noticed. At first, he mocked her, then grew irritated. He was losing the quiet, obedient wife he had molded. But he refused to believe she had the courage to defy him completely. Rita asked to further her education, and Solomon laughed, dismissing the idea. "You don't need more than what I've given you," he said. But this time, she didn't drop it. "I want more for myself," she replied firmly. For the first time, Solomon felt uneasy. Rita was no longer asking, she was demanding. He saw something dangerous in her eyes: determination. Rita began spending time outside the mansion, reconnecting with an old friend. Solomon didn't like it. He tightened his grip, monitoring her calls, questioning her every move. But the more he tried to control her, the more she resisted. Their arguments grew frequent. The woman he had once dominated was slipping through his fingers. And for the first time, he feared losing control. At a high-profile event, Solomon belittled Rita in front of his friends, laughing as they mocked her. But instead of shrinking, she met his gaze and calmly said, "You don't own me." Gasps filled the room. Solomon was furious. That night, he expected her to apologize. Instead, she packed a small bag and whispered, "You'll regret this." Then, she walked out. For the first time in years, Rita tasted freedom. She rented a small apartment, took a job, and started building her own life. Every challenge reminded her that she was capable, that she didn't need Solomon to survive. Meanwhile, Solomon expected her to return, begging. Days turned to weeks, and she didn't. Instead, he saw her in magazines, thriving. The woman he once controlled was now out of his reach. Frustrated, Solomon took action. If she wouldn't crawl back, he would force her hand. He served her divorce papers, expecting her to beg. Instead, she signed them without hesitation, smiling as she handed them back. For the first time in his life, Solomon felt powerless. Rita wasn't the broken woman he thought she was. She was free, and she had no intention of looking back. Without Rita, Solomon's life unraveled. Business deals crumbled, his reputation suffered, and loneliness consumed him. He had underestimated her worth, believing she was nothing without him. But it was he who was lost without her. Rita, on the other hand, soared. She built a career, found love, and embraced the life she was once denied. And when she looked back, it wasn't with regret, but with the satisfaction of knowing she had finally won. Rita embraced her new life with unwavering determination. She secured a managerial position at a fashion company, proving her intelligence and resilience. For the first time in years, she made her own choices without fear. Each morning, she woke up feeling liberated, no longer shackled by Solomon's oppressive control. She was no longer his possession, she was her own person. Solomon, however, spiraled into frustration. He expected Rita to struggle, to realize she needed him. Instead, he saw headlines praising her rise, photos of her attending elite events, glowing with confidence. It infuriated him. He had built her, yet she was thriving without him. His ego couldn't handle it. Unable to accept Rita's success, Solomon reached out. He sent flowers, apologetic messages, even gifts, but she ignored them. She had no interest in rekindling a past that had suffocated her. He underestimated how much she had changed. Desperate, Solomon tried a different tactic, showing up at her workplace, pretending to be a supportive ex. But Rita wasn't fooled. She looked him in the eyes and said, "I am not the woman you left. I owe you nothing." His chest tightened. For the first time, he realized he had lost her for good. While Rita thrived, Solomon's empire began to crumble. Key investors pulled out, and rumors of his unethical dealings surfaced. His arrogance had blinded him to the shifting tides, and now, the empire he once controlled was slipping from his grasp. Alone in his mansion, he stared at Rita's old photos, regretting the way he had treated her. He had spent years breaking her down, never imagining she would one day rise above him. Now, she was untouchable, and he was drowning in his own downfall. Rita's success wasn't just professional, it was personal. She reconnected with old friends, traveled, and embraced every opportunity life offered. She no longer feared speaking her mind, no longer felt the weight of Solomon's expectations. At an award ceremony, she received recognition for her contributions to the fashion industry. As she stood on stage, she thought about the woman she used to be, the one who had lived in Solomon's shadow. That woman was gone. She had become everything he had tried to suppress. Solomon couldn't bear it anymore. He arranged a private meeting with Rita, begging for a second chance. "I was wrong," he admitted, voice thick with regret. "I need you." But Rita remained unmoved. She leaned forward and said, "You never needed me. You needed control. And now that you have none, you realize my worth." She walked away, leaving Solomon in the silence of his regrets. For the first time, Rita opened her heart to someone new. Daniel, a kind-hearted entrepreneur, saw her for who she truly was, not as a trophy or an obligation, but as an equal. With him, she felt something Solomon had never given her: respect. Solomon heard about Daniel and burned with jealousy. The thought of Rita with another man made his blood boil. But this time, he had no power over her. She was beyond his reach, and that realization shattered him. In a desperate move, Solomon spread false rumors about Rita, hoping to damage her reputation. He underestimated the woman she had become. Instead of breaking, Rita confronted him publicly, exposing his lies. The media turned against him, and the last of his allies abandoned him. His own actions had led to his downfall, and now, there was no one left to save him. Not even Rita. Solomon's wealth crumbled, lawsuits drained him, and the mansion that once symbolized his power was seized. He had mocked Rita for being poor, but now, he faced the same fate. Karma had finally caught up. He reached out one last time, hoping Rita would pity him. But when she saw him, She felt nothing, not love, not hatred, just indifference. "This is the life you created for yourself," she said, turning her back on him for the last time. Rita visited her mother's grave, tears streaming down her face, not from sadness, but relief. "I made it, Mama," she whispered. She had escaped a life of oppression and built something greater than she had ever imagined. As she left the cemetery, she felt lighter. Solomon was a closed chapter in her life. She had no anger left for him, only gratitude for the lessons that had made her stronger. With Solomon in her past, Rita embraced her future. She and Daniel built a life filled with love, mutual respect, and shared dreams. For the first time, she was in a relationship where she was valued, not controlled. On a quiet evening, as she watched the sunset, she realized something: she had won. Not because she had defeated Solomon, but because she had found herself. And that was the greatest victory of all. Rita now understood the true meaning of freedom, not just escaping Solomon's grip but owning her life completely. She expanded her fashion business, mentoring young women who had faced struggles like hers. Every success, every milestone reminded her that she had built this life on her own terms. Solomon, on the other hand, had faded into obscurity. Once the powerful billionaire who dictated her every move, he was now just another man ruined by his own arrogance. She no longer thought of him with anger, only as a lesson in what she would never allow in her life again. One afternoon, while overseeing her company's expansion, Rita received an unexpected visitor, Solomon. He looked nothing like the man she once knew. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his confidence replaced by exhaustion. "I need help," he admitted, voice weak. For a brief moment, the past flashed before her. The humiliation, the pain, the years of being treated like nothing. But Rita had moved beyond vengeance. She looked at him and said, "You don't need me. You need to face yourself." Then, she walked away, leaving him in the ruins of his choices. Rita's fashion empire reached new heights when she was invited to showcase her work at an international event. It was a full-circle moment, from the girl Solomon once dismissed as unworthy to a global powerhouse. Standing on that stage, she knew she had rewritten her destiny. No man, no past, no amount of pain could define her. She had won, not just against Solomon, but against every limitation placed upon her. Daniel continued to stand by her side, showing her what true partnership looked like. Unlike Solomon, he didn't see her as an extension of himself but as a woman with her own dreams. For the first time, Rita allowed herself to love without fear. She wasn't surviving anymore, she was living. And this love, built on respect, felt like the most beautiful thing she had ever known. News broke that Solomon had lost everything: his company, his home, his dignity. He was facing legal battles, abandoned by the same people who once worshipped him. The world had moved on, and so had Rita. One of Solomon's old associates approached her, suggesting she buy his company at a cheap price. It would be the ultimate revenge, to own what he once ruled. But Rita declined. "I have no interest in his past," she said. Her future was too bright to be tainted by old ghosts. Fate led Rita to cross paths with Solomon one last time. He was a shadow of the man he once was, sitting alone in a run-down cafe. When he saw her, shame flickered in his eyes. "You won," he admitted, voice hollow. But Rita only smiled. "It was never about winning, Solomon. It was about finding myself." And with that, she left, never looking back. Rita and Daniel's relationship flourished, built on love and mutual respect. He proposed in the simplest yet most beautiful way, without possession, without control, just an invitation to share a future. And for the first time, Rita said yes without hesitation. This love wasn't about dependence. It wasn't about proving anything. It was simply about happiness. And Rita finally allowed herself to embrace it. On the eve of her wedding, Rita sat by her window, reflecting on her journey. She had walked through fire, lost herself, fought to reclaim her identity, and emerged stronger than ever. She no longer held on to bitterness. The past had shaped her, but it did not define her. She was free. And for the first time in her life, she was truly at peace. Rita's wedding was nothing extravagant, just a beautiful, intimate ceremony surrounded by people who truly loved her. As she walked down the aisle, she saw not just Daniel, but a future where she was respected, cherished, and valued. When she said her vows, she wasn't just promising to love Daniel, she was promising to always love and honor herself. This was her victory. This was her happily ever after. Rita had once lived under a man's shadow, convinced she had no worth outside of his approval. But now, she stood tall, a woman of success, strength, and self-respect. Her story wasn't about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about a woman who refused to be defined by another's cruelty. She had written her own ending, and it was far more beautiful than anything Solomon had ever imagined for her. That's the end of the story. What did you learn about the story? Please leave a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories. Thanks for watching.